What's going on, everyone? I just wanted to take a moment here with Shannon Frye before the episode gets started and just dedicate this to a couple lost soldiers in the field during this particular time period for Madrost and its history. I'd like to dedicate this episode to the great Angie Gabriel and, of course, Adrian Mejia. Thank you guys again for all your support, and I hope you guys enjoy this next episode. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Poppitt's Corner, a very unique and special one. It's going to hit closer to this side of the table today, but I'd like to bring back on the show, of course, the one and only, my good brethren, the other hostess of the mostest, the one and only Mr. Shannon Frye. Shannon, how you doing today, sir? Thanks so much
Hey,
for
how you
doing this.
doing, Tanner? Right on. Hell yeah, man.
Should be a fun one today. So why don't we do this? Because we did get to interview Alejandro Pelaez last week on the particular reissue of Into the Aquatic Sector, which I do have in my hand right there. What I thought we would do today is just either just talk about all the stuff that maybe we didn't get to during that specific episode, like maybe go through song by song basis and the origins of certain parts, or what I was thinking during this kind of era of my musical growth, as it were, just to kind of touch upon the players that were involved with this, and just have some fun, tell some stories. And so if you're ready, man, I'd love to get
Yeah,
started with this.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's start from the very, very beginning. So, you had already released some demos and you had released a first album before you got to this. And then comes along the second album, Into the Aquatic Sector, right? So, going from the first album to this album, what were was there any changes mentally? Were there any changes that you wanted to do that you didn't do on the first album, or was this more of a, a cohesive follow up to the first album? What was going through the mind at the time?
Well, during this time, 2012 into 2013, the band literally imploded on itself. So our last gig with that specific lineup, the Maleficent lineup, was November of 2012. And at this particular show, we knew that our drummer was leaving at the time. His name's Josh. We knew he was leaving at this specific time to go play in another band, and we wished him the best of luck, obviously. And there's no ill will feelings towards any of that shit. It's all in the past. But we knew he was leaving, so we played a gig at the Airliner. It was us, Xanthocroid, and a band called Doomsayers, and a couple other bands in between that. I think Neko Goblikon played. You remember that band? So it was all those four for sure. I have to go back and kind of look at the flyer for that, but it was at the Airliner, and I remember us staying till like the whole show was done, because we had nothing to lose, right? It was like a Saturday. Let's just kind of see some players and see what they can do. And I was already in the mindset of like, I'm just going to watch bands. I'm going to take a different approach to finding musicians and just watch bands play. And if I like a certain musician, I'm going to go up and ask them. Right.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened. Our bassist at the time and I kind of said to each other, I think this guy's it. I think this guy can do what we need him to do for the next material. And unfortunately, me and the bass player were kind of butting heads at that specific moment. So it didn't really work out very very well. But so he left within, I say, 2 to 3 weeks later. And our guitar player at the time was in the same band as the drummer that was actually leaving. So obviously he went towards that aspect, which again, is totally fine. And so at that moment, I didn't have a band. So there wasn't any thought to even making a second or third or fourth, or fifth, whatever it is, album. Because this is 2013, so it was like almost the probably the lowest point of the band's career so far. So we release the album, we do the tour, all this kind of transpires. Then NAMM weekend happens. So at NAMM weekend in 2013, Exodus was playing the Grove in Anaheim, and it was free if you got the tickets or whatever from at the NAMM event, and of course I got some, but they also were serving free Jägermeister, and free Jägermeister with free thrash metal is a win-win for me, but it's also probably a huge detriment because I'm sure everybody else was all fucked up, right?
Right.
So at this moment, we go to the show. Tons of people, right? I'm running into the homies in Fueled by Fire, Rick and Carlos, and I see my buddy Richard Oriana. And I had recently saw Tormentor play, and which was his band at the time, and he was no longer playing with them. I didn't see my buddy on stage. So I go up to Richard, and I'm like, "Hey, man, I'm like, so are you not playing with Tormentor anymore?" And he's like, I'm, not really anymore. I'm kind of done playing. He almost seemed like he was kind of done playing music at this point. And like an idiot, I kind of, we were all hammered, and I went up to him. I said, "Hey, do you still play bass?" He's like, "Yeah, if the right opportunity comes along, I'd love to." And I was like, "Do you want to jam?" Not thinking, "Do you want to join the band?" Just, "Hey, do you want to jam and just see what happens?"
Right.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
So keep in mind too, man, I had shows booked in March of 2013, right? So this is January. I only had Caesar at the time, right? So I was trying to put a band together to do the shows just to fulfill our basic contractual needs for live shows. So at this point, I wasn't even thinking of a live album. I just got to a point during this time where it was like either do or die mode, and I wasn't gonna fucking die. I was gonna put in the work to do this thing. So again, there's a lot of stuff that happened during that specific time period, and so that was going through my mind to answer your question. So
Yeah.
obviously it worked out. We had this instant chemistry, me and Richard and Caesar at the time, and we just kind of hit it off, man. We liked the same stuff. Those guys, entrusted so much in me personally, and trusted me to obviously bring this to the next level, and I in return trusted them for their music, for their skill set in terms of musicality wise, in terms of reliability, in terms of because we had to rehearse every week and whatnot. This is during those times. So around this time too, we had a few other kind of lineup changes. I had a couple friends help us out with the shows coming up, and then we get hit up to play Thrasher to Mile 6, right? And during all this time too, we were getting interviewed by the wonderful ladies in Metal Load, who Elizabeth Gore is relatively the only one still active in our scene out here. She does Lone Wolf's Productions, but at the time she did an interview with they all did an interview with us, I should say. So a lot of stuff was happening, man. It all just blends together for me. It was a tough year for me personally in terms of musically wise. And so obviously we played Thrasher to Mile and had a great time, minus, maybe some fan interactions where we weren't particularly too happy with the reception in that specific building. But it seemed like because it was getting recorded, everybody else outside of that room loved us, and we played first. So that was a big deal, man. We're still the only Orange County band to ever play Thrasher to Mile. That's a big
Right.
deal. I feel like with all of the hard work we did, that's what, those are the opportunities we got, and I'm so grateful for it. So immediately after this, our guitar player at the time just decides not to he stops showing up to rehearsal, right?
Mm.
So I obviously, this is when Alejandro hits me up for the interview, right, that we talked about last week, and that whole thing kind of gets pieced together, and bring him in. We again, instant chemistry, right? He admitted freely on the show that it was his first show ever with us,
Yes,
and
got right.
apparently I knew and forgot about it, but obviously he remembers it very vividly. So we just had this instant chemistry then, and immediately after this, I said, you know what? We're gonna make a second record. We're gonna make a better record than our first album, and I'm gonna show these ex members that I could do this with or without them, right?
Mm.
So I'm not trying to be bitter about this. This is just the mindset I was in 2013 2014, where I was really pissed. I mean, if you listen to the Into the Aquatic Sector record, the material is very angry. It's all over the place. It's very technical, and I wanted to prove to myself and them that this is, I'm going to make a better record. You watch and see. And I don't know if that's the case. That's a little bit, I leave that up to you guys. But in that sense, I was like determined to make a better record just for myself. So it was nice to have a team behind me. And like I said, that instant bond, they trusted me, I trusted them. And this is the result of that, with guys like Peter Demore, obviously with Alejandro's connections, and us working with Adrian Mejia at the time for our photography, and Alejandro Leon with the artwork. So I was fortunate to have a team, and that's really what this encapsulates for me personally, is that the trust and having a team behind you. So in terms of that, that's kind of where I was at, mentally speaking, on a musical level.
Okay, okay. So as you're writing the songs, now before we go too deep into song by song, but in general, as you're writing the songs, would, like, for example, some of this, some of the album is a concept, okay, where the other songs aren't, but half of it is. So what I'm getting at is this something you had already decided as you're writing the songs, or did the concept come as the songs were being written?
So at
And
okay, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead, because
Okay.
I can add on later. Go ahead.
Okay. So at this point, to answer your question, I already had a story particularly in mind because of how angry I was at what just transpired earlier that I mentioned. Um, so that whole concept was kind of my way of almost venting, almost my therapy, as it were, where I could music for me, I could kind of write my thoughts, and it's okay to say the things that I said, obviously, in music, right? It's kind of like my therapy. So since I was so pissed off, I decided to write a story. How I'm not particularly huge on people in general, right? I love individuals, but I hate people.
Right,
Kind
right,
of thing.
right.
At
Yeah.
this, and again, I'm only speaking for 2013, 2014 me, not
Right, right,
today.
right.
But at that time, that's where I was at. So I needed a concept in order for me to have all this material to write around. So I built the story first, lyrically speaking, and wrote around it musically, and infused other elements in terms of you know new bands I was discovering, and the death metal scene in Florida, like the Nocturnus, the I don't know, Morbid Angels, the Deicides, Cannibal Corpse, even though they're technically not from Florida, but and then
Atheist.
yeah,
Atheist.
exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Cynic,
Mm,
and bands like Pestilence from the Netherlands.
right.
So bands of that kind of caliber, I was wanting to infuse more into our sound. So it's a lot heavier in terms of the musical direction, but also lyrically because of what transpired. This is kind of the result of that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. 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 It does. So okay, then let's start just for the shits and giggles. Let's run down the song titles, song by song. So we'll just start with the original. Did not have the live album. The re-release has an additional live album. But before we get that into it, let's go over the song titles on the first album. On this, sorry, the release, the initial release.
Sure.
Okay, so the unknown. What do you remember about the unknown? And
Okay, so at this point, this was one of the last tracks written for the album, right? We wrote this in the studio. Me and Peter Demore sat down and he helped me construct this piece that would later start the album. And I remember specifically telling him I want to do a keyboard piece on this to help, you know, set the tone, set the mood for what's to come, right? I think it does a good job of that. And so he helped me piece it together. He added in like Mike's laugh at the end of the song, right? That's Mike Abominator.
right,
We
right,
put him in the unknown, and I didn't have a title for the song. So that's why it's called The Unknown, because I didn't have a fucking title. So that's what I
okay,
decided to call it,
okay,
right?
right on,
And
okay,
and because it's a double entendre too, because it's like you don't know what you're listening to. It's unknown.
right,
And
right,
I didn't want to leave the title as a blank, so I just titled it The Unknown.
very cool, very cool. Okay, the second one, "Frozen Beneath the Snow." Now
All
this is a
right,
pretty brutal song. So you know, it's great for what comes next.
correct. This was actually the last song written for the album. So at this point, we had the other tracks recorded, and I had so many leftover riffs, and we needed another song to round out the album because it was too short. It would have been like 22 minutes, and it's not really a long time for a studio album. I mean, we
Mm.
could probably get away with it, but I wanted it to be a little bit longer. So this is actually the last track that I wrote for the album itself, and the guys didn't even know this song. So I always call this the Frankenstein of Madrost songs because it's literally all my riffs that I had left over compiled into one song. And then I kind of structured everything and made the vocals fit a certain way and having the high notes and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was really the last song to be recorded on the album, and kind of had to teach everybody it in the studio.
Right. Okay. How was that though? Teaching them in the studio. That had to have been kind of
It was a lot of give and takes, man. It was a lot of like I wrote this part for having a blast beat here or this, that, and the other, and we would try new things, but ultimately kind of I knew the direction I wanted the song to go into, and that's kind of what happened, and I'm eternally grateful again for it. But and then the scream in the beginning, I just felt like it needed something there, because it would have been a whole thing of music without anything. You got to put something there. And since I did high notes on the first album a little bit, I wanted to incorporate that. And man, you want to talk about getting railed by interviews,
yeah,
or not by interviews, by reviewers.
you're right. Yeah.
Wow. Look no further than Frozen Beneath the Snow at that time. Right. We
Uh-huh.
got to think about this. This is 2014. This is
Right.
well before everything that kind of transpired after with the new wave of heavy metal scene being so booming.
Right. Right. So the next one, Universal Energy,
So I wrote this song
you know,
for my mom.
Alien Energy.
Universal Energy, yeah. So it's uh at this point, this was the first song that was written for the album. And we played it at Thrash in a Mile. I remember it had an entirely different intro, which we just scrapped because it just our mixing and mastering engineer Matt Earl from Xanthocroid was like, dude, this doesn't even fit. Like, just axe this. And it was his idea to meld Frozen Beneath the Snow into Universal Energy in terms of having that vocal, like the vocal line where I kind of accentuate the snow, and then it goes directly into Universal Energy. That came from Matthew Earl. That was his idea, and we just ran with it. So, I wanted to write a song for my mom since I wrote a song for Pops on Maleficent entitled Crypt Keeper. Right, that's his
Right.
theme song. And so my mom has a theme song, and it's Universal Energy because she's so positive about life, and I wanted to infuse some of that in a otherwise dark album.
Oh, very cool. Okay, then this is probably one of my favorites, as we had discussed on the top 10 Madrost songs. Operation Xenophobic Protocol.
Yeah, Operation Xenomorphic Protocol. So this is probably the most technical on the album, I will say. This is definitely one I put a lot of work into in the riffs and whatnot. I don't know what the fuck I was on. I was just in a trance of so much emotion and just pissed off energy. And it's a lot more technical. It's a lot more just, but it makes so much sense. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's just, it's one of the songs where I don't think I'll ever write like that again because it's almost
Right.
like technical compacted into, the a 3 minute song or whatever, but it's not technical at the same time because it's very structured. So it's a
Right.
technical structured piece. And this is actually I'm just going to spoil it for everybody on what songs are, related in the story. And this is actually the final hurrah, and it should have ended the album, but again, it wouldn't have fit in this particular order on the album. But this is the point in the story where all the aliens are coming up at, after infusing themselves into our bodies and taking over the world and essentially destroying the world as we know it. So that's what it is lyrically speaking. Musically wise, it's just very, I would say, technically structured. How about that?
There you go. All right, well, then comes up the Oceanic Prelude.
Right, which Alejandro talked about on the previous episode. So if you want to hear more about that song, I guess I'll leave a link in the description. Is that what people do now? Fuck it, just go back and listen to the episode. How about that?
Right, right. Okay. So then we go to Subterranean Nightmare.
Okay. So obviously, as we discussed in the previous episode with Alejandro, I wanted to utilize his talents on the classical, on classical guitar. Excuse me. And so he came up with the Oceanic Prelude, which obviously starts the story. So this is where the story kind of starts. It's almost like side B. This is where the concept album starts, right? It's almost like you're kind of swimming in the ocean, right? Before you're getting dragged down and essentially killed by the xenomorphs. And so Subterranean Nightmare is the start of the story. Or I should say, yeah, I should say start of the story lyrically, where just like what the album cover represents, with them dragging us down to the bottom of the ocean, stealing our souls out, infusing themselves into our bodies. So this is the point where that kind of happens.
Right. Okay. So then we go into the title track, into the Aquatic Sector.
And
So
I
I
should
take it
mention,
this is okay.
sure, and I should mention this too. We initially had Mike Abominator do all the backup vocals because of his gnarly growl. I couldn't do the gnarly kind of death growls that I wanted on this album. I wanted it to be more of a death metal kind of album than Maleficent. So I love his vocal deliveries on Subterranean Nightmare so much. His laugh, like the overall just grittiness, and I just love that he infused his character in the song and made it even better.
Well,
Right?
before we get too involved with Mikey, let's move on. We'll come back to Mike. So okay. So next then is the title track, Into the Aquatic Sector. So I take it this is the next song on the storyline.
Correct. So this is the point of the story where they're sucking out all the souls, infusing themselves in us, and essentially what's going to happen is they're plotting to take over the world, right? Like what we do every day, Pinky. Try and take over the world, right? So I was obviously, a fan of cartoons too. So that whole mindset of Pinky in the Brain comes into play for me here too. But regardless of the fact, I wanted to make a song where I had clean guitars in the middle of the piece itself. I never knew how to do that. I was always doing it at the beginning of the song or probably at the end at some point, but never in the middle. I could never figure out how to structure it. And Peter kind of helped me do it in parts. And I got to choose like my clean tones and what would kind of set me up for the Essence of Time and Trying the Rotting Earth on a clean guitar level. Does that make sense? So like this is when I was kind of experimenting with that whole thing, and I felt it was, I don't know, man. I every time I go back and listen to it, it's like one of my favorite parts in from our catalog. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and then the final track, Depravity.
So Depravity. This is definitely the most death metal track I think on the album. It's kind of a more simplistic way of death metal for us. Skeletal Remains was just kind of booming with their first kind of couple albums. Really loved them. I wanted to incorporate more of that into us, right? And that old school kind of pestilence death metal that just fucking rules. So I think Depravity is much as it is like a negative kind of song lyrically speaking. This has nothing to do with the story. It's just a song on the album. But I think this one is just the most death metal track on the album. It's just straightforward death metal.
Right. And it's a good ending song. Very cool. Yeah. So all right. So then let's go to the guest musicians as we were talking. You mentioned Mike Abominator. How did Mike Abominator come into the picture to be on the Aquatic Sector album?
So initially he invited me to do backup vocals for Gravehill's Death Curse record. So I got to have the honor of being a part of that specific album, which I guess to many fans is a classic in the death metal realm. So I'm honored to be a part of some death metal history. And I always loved death metal. I just couldn't get that low in my register. I always had the mid to high register. So I was always trying to figure out how can I do this in death metal. Does that make sense without sounding like a thrash band?
Yeah, absolutely.
So he just loved my vocals and said that I want the best of the best from SoCal on this album with us. And it ended up working out great. We had Nick from Crepitus on it, myself, Chris Reifert. Come on now, right? Death metal legend. So it was a pleasure to be a part of this. So that's kind of how he kind of set out, I guess, casted the first stone. And I followed up with it. I had always wanted to work with Mikey. I always loved his vocal approach. I wanted to get him more involved into what Madrost was doing. And it was kind of my thank you too to him writing our first ever review of the band, because at
Yeah.
that point, man, it was tough. It was tough getting people to notice you. And Mike didn't have to do that for us. He didn't have to write for Metal Maniacs and write a killer review and help me with so much, getting all the contacts together. And he didn't have to do that. So this was kind of my way of saying thank you, but also utilizing his talents to fit what I wanted this album to go, or where I wanted this album to go, which was more of a death metal style anyways.
Right. Right. And then you had keyboards by Peter Demore.
Yeah, he's the producer. He was him and I
Okay.
were working on that. Obviously, the Unknown has some keyboard aspects, and then Oceanic Prelude has it as well. We put some ambient tracks over it, so I got to give credit where credit's due on these things.
Right.
I'm a
Right.
stickler for it,
Right. Okay. So then you were doing some touring and whatnot, and out of the whether or not it was on the tour, but you were able to include a bonus disc on the reissue through No Life Till Metal Records. And this is a live album called Live Aquatic. So tell us a little bit about how the live album came about.
Sure, man. So this was well after the tour. So we initially had done 2 tours on this run. We did one with the Aquatic lineup, all 4 of us. Only played about 6 or 7 shows, I want to say. Maybe 8 or 9, maybe. Because we had so many dates that weren't filled. But we still had a great time. It was like a nice vacation almost. Learned a lot about each other and a lot about what not to do and what to do on the tour. So in terms of that, it was a great learning experience. And we get back, obviously, still doing some shows. Alejandro steps aside for schooling because he was going to school to study classical music and be a classical guitar player, right? And of course, school is very important, absolutely.
Right.
So nothing but respect and love there. Uh, and I remember the day he told us, I took him aside and said, "Look, we're not going to have any bad blood. We totally, you know, uh, support your decision, and looking forward to seeing what you do, and let's hang out, right?" So I never wanted to have bad blood with anybody, and especially with this lineup. So definitely made sure that we didn't burn any bridges. It
Mm-hmm.
was a mutual understanding, and he wanted to go to school. We had to respect that. And so obviously, with my kind of years of knowing Big Cat and him doing the first tour with us uh, in 2012 with one of the other bands and whatnot. So I knew that he had the chops to do it, and I always wanted to work with Big Cat, and I just thought that it could give him some other opportunities, and he can create opportunities for us, man. And boy, oh boy, that was a great decision because he came in and like right as we before that we knew that this tour was happening with Brain Dead. We've had a couple guitar players after Alejandro. One of them they couldn't do it, so we brought in Big Cat to do it, and the chemistry again, it just fits so well, man. Between me, him, and Richard and Caesar, it was a no brainer. So that's the lineup that recorded the live aquatic record, which was just a one-off show in 2016 at D Piazza's. And I always can't stress this enough. I think it's really important to have soundboard recordings of a band, of your own band, to have extra material in the vault that isn't released, that you can use for maybe some reissues coming up, or save it for a 10-year anniversary of the record and release that. It's always, I think it's just always cool to have a nice little bonus for a band. as a diehard fan of bands and whatnot, if your band, if Avenger of Blood released a live album that was a soundboard recording, I'd be all over that. I'd be like, I want that in my fucking collection.
Oh yeah, me
No
too.
brainer. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Right.
And a lot of bands don't utilize that. They don't utilize we're paying an extra $10 to have that recording on a CD from the soundboard, because a lot of venues offer that, and DiPiazza's always offered that for like 10 or $15, and it was like no brainer. Here you go. So I always knew that I had this in my vault for years and years and years and years, and not even with the intention of ever releasing Into the Aquatic Sector ever again. I was done with that. You know what I mean?
Right.
With whatever transpired, I was done. I wanted to move on and possibly never release it. It's like, if you had it, great, hang on to it. But obviously when Scott approached us of doing this, it was like I had learned and grew as a human being at this point, and it was like, why not? What do I have to lose?
Right.
Gaining a whole new fan base for a record that's long out of print. Let's just see what happens. And I pitched him the idea after him asking us. I was like, well, I have this live record in my vault. Do you guys want it? Because I had to, edit it and put in WAV files and all that other stuff for Rob, who did a great job on the remastering for this album. And it was like, why not? And they offered the 2 CD set, and I thought it was a great idea. And I've been reading a lot of people's, comments on how well the live album sounds, because it's very raw. I wasn't sure how well it would translate to the world, because it's not perfect, dude. It's warts and all. Nothing I can do about certain levels of this, that, and the other. But it ended up working out great,
It does. It sounds good. The live album does sound good.
Who knows? Maybe I'll do a cassette only release or something of just the live album. Why not?
There you go.
What do I have to lose? Do a
Right.
split with Avenger of Blood and just put live tracks on each of them.
There you go. I think we should do that.
Right? Be like Live Blood. Boom. Just put fucking, Avenger of Blood on one side, Madrost on the other.
Right.
Just only live songs. That'd be awesome, man.
Yeah, that would be.
Just having cool stuff like that is very important for me as a fan of bands in general.
Right. So now, going back in time, going back to the release, when was this released originally? Do you remember the date?
So there's 2 dates. Remember how I mentioned that the album had come out, but it was a demo mix? It wasn't the actual, I wouldn't consider it the original. I would consider it the demo, which came out in June of, I think it was June of 2014. Had it remixed, remastered, we edited all that fun stuff, and it came out on September, I want to say September 23rd, 2014. You have to correct me if I'm wrong. I'm terrible with dates as far as that goes, but definitely September of 2014. And I remember the initial reaction for it it was kind of lukewarm, man. It was really just, but it was also the start to me doing PR at that time and learning how to promote it properly. And we didn't have podcasts readily available, It was hard to get interviews, and thankfully I was doing KTST at that time, so I had my own radio show with Benny the Breeze that I could promote it there, and Andy Ford up in LA that was giving me opportunities that no other radio station was at that specific time. So I would go on his show all the time to promote it and just grassrooting it, man. It's just, it starts with the grassroots level.
Yeah, it does. It's all right. So then 2021 happens and it's re-released, and the artwork was completely redone by Tony Cole. Now, how did Tony Cole come into the picture? And although it's the greatest decision I think a lot of people can make, especially this artist doing this cover, I think this cover, I wish I could show mine here, but since mine has your all's autographs on there, so,
Just totally spoil it for
but
you.
this, yeah, but this is amazing, man.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And Tony Cole needs more recognition as well because he's an amazing artist.
Dude, I fully agree with that statement. So initially, we released Maleficent, a reissue of Maleficent in 2021, which I think you were referencing with the 2021 date. But so that did really well. Like that sold a lot of copies for the label, to my knowledge. And I was kind of informed, well, if Maleficent does well, we want to do it for, the same thing to Into the Aquatic Sector, right? Which obviously came out in 2022. So
Yeah, sorry, I
at
thought it was late 2021. So, okay, I'm sorry.
no, all good, all good. I'm just trying to make sure I document it properly. So Tony Cole and I have been friends for years and years and years. We met actually in 2012 on the first tour, and I always wanted to work with him. And I had him on my radio show to help promote his artwork, and I didn't know how easy it was to work with such high profile artists and bands and producers. I thought it was difficult to try and reach those people. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So as a band, as a player in a band yourself, reaching these people that you kind of have always wanted to work with, it was like, wow, that's so easy to do. It really? Okay, let's do it, And so we initially worked with him on The Essence of Time and then Trying the Rotting Earth. And he had always wanted to redo the album cover. He always told me, like, this album cover is terrible. And it was kind of my opportunity, or our opportunity, to work together again and do something cool. And it's like, okay, you think the album cover is terrible? Let's see what you can do. And it was basically that. That's what we got. That's what we got. And I'm honored. And of course, if you have the original cover, that's great. But I only want to press this album now with this particular cover, because this to me is the album cover.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and me and Tony just have a great working relationship together. We've built a friendship, and just, he understands how I work and I understand how he works. Again, that team mentality, man, you got to have it. It's super important to me.
Yeah, it is.
And obviously we're working on a project as we speak, which we will get more into at a later date, but I only want to work with Tony Cole on album covers and whatnot.
Yeah, very
super
cool.
fun, super easy to work with. He knows what I want, and sometimes he doesn't know what I want, and he'll just do something, and I'm like, cool, can you add this, this, and this? Oh yeah, no problem, and it's done. So I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I can't get much easier than that. I don't have to, it's not like pulling teeth or whatever with the artist. So
Right.
but and I gotta mention this too, man. Working with Adrian Mejia on the photography that we talked about last week, super crucial, super honored to know that we were one of the only bands to work with him in terms of shooting our photography for an album, because he would do live shots, he would do live videos, but I'm talking in terms of working with him intimately on this specific cover and just getting these kind of shots, man. Every time I see that, it brings a tear to my eye that I can't go and hand him a couple albums. Say, here you go, man. Look what we did. But I know he's watching wherever he is, and he's super proud, and knowing that his legacy is enshrined in this too, man, can't go wrong.
Right. Very cool.
But I'm curious to hear from your perspective the legacy of this album. Has it left anything in terms of you as a listener?
To me, as a listener, it has. It should to most people if you are into the aggressive side of metal. Yeah, like to me, man, this is just super intense. It's crystal clear. The re-release and the original was good too, but this is definitely a step up in that direction as far as quality of the overall sound. I think the songs are amazing. I think the flow of the album is great, and I think if you haven't heard it, you need to. Those that have heard it, man, keep buy another copy. You know, I think it's really good. I think it's really good. I think it's held up, and it's too bad that people never caught it before, but I think it's really catching on now. But it could happen more. It could happen more. You know?
See, I want to go back to your initial point that you mentioned of that it not catching on when it first was released. And I don't know if that's because of the material presented on it or because there's so many goddamn bands or because of the album cover or because of when it was initially, released at a time that this stuff wasn't very popular. I don't know. I can't explain why it didn't catch on, but over the years, it seems like more and more people, this is like their album.
Yeah.
Uh,
When you see the reviews online, and I know you don't pay attention to a lot of the reviews, but those of us that are fans, we go and check things out. You know, you have to. Well, what do they say about this? What man? Everybody loves it. Everybody that I've seen do a review on this loves it. There was a few that were like, well, the high screams, but those were the old days. You know, before, like you were saying at the beginning of this episode, how you were criticized because of the high screaming Angel of Death vocal there at the beginning, right?
right.
And before this new wave of traditional heavy metal caught back on, which was just starting to do so at that time, you know, you got ridiculed for it. I think it fits just fine.
You know what Tony Cole told me, and it's so true. And I'm going to mention this publicly, and thanks Tony for this. He goes, "I'm so glad that you put in those high notes. You know why? Because it makes it more relevant to as many people as possible. You're not just pertaining to a fucking death metal crowd or a thrash metal crowd. It you can it's it's more accept accessible. Does that make sense? Like so you have more of an opportunity to have a bigger audience with that just by doing high notes,
Right.
you know.
But just alone, that alone, like those those high screams alone are another additive to what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, it's another
More
dynamic.
variance, more variance, more yeah, more dynamic. Yeah, adds. It's a different aspect to an already existing metal ball, so to say, and adding those screams and adding the keyboards. Those like wow, you know, bands weren't doing that at the time much.
I think because we were a band that always took chances and were never afraid to, didn't give a shit about what other people thought, just did our own thing. That could be why it's held up so well. Because again, listening back to this, I can't believe it sounds this good all these years later that it's held up this well, man, and people still enjoy it. So God bless people for for supporting it still, man. Who knew? And you know this too, man. You know more than anybody, and I know more than anybody. Most albums have like a 2 week shelf life, 2 day shelf life sometimes, not an 8 year shelf life or 9 year or 10. You know,
Two
most
weeks.
albums don't get that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm eternally grateful, and just the fact that like I'm talking to you about this, and like I mentioned years prior to us doing this, where I was a big fan of Avenger of Blood. If you told me that Shannon Frye or Avenger Blood and I are going to be discussing an album that I was a part of, I would have said, "Holy shit, really?" Like, you know what I mean? Because like, I'm still that fan. I'm still, I don't know, man. I have that fan mentality like everybody else, and it's not a bad thing. It's just I'm humbled and grateful are the two words I would say. So
Same.
thanks everybody for checking out the episode, and hopefully you learned a little bit about this particular album in question. And man, it'd be cool to do this for like maybe Death Brigade when it reaches its I don't know 15-year mark, which will be next year. Yeah. So we'll have to do this
2008?
again. Yep. We'll have to do this
2000?
again next year for maybe we'll do a song by song basis and just go through each of them and learn a little bit about this because I love that shit. I'm a total nerd like you.
Yeah, right on. Oh yeah, I could tell you a lot about that one.
The ins and outs, the ups and downs, and all that fun stuff. But it's imperative that we tell it in a non-biased way, and like we're not coming at this from a vulgar sense. We're coming out at this as like no, this is really what happened kind of sense. You know what I mean? It's imperative to have the neutral stance, and definitely looking forward to doing that with you. But Shannon, I appreciate a moment of your time to do this with us.
Oh yeah, man, it's a great time. Thank you
Always.
for filling me in because this is an amazing album, and if you haven't heard this, you need to.
Appreciate it, my man. And obviously a big shout out to Bill Badford and of course the great Scott Waters at No Life to Metal Records for believing in the band and setting us up for a greater audience, and looking forward to definitely playing more live shows in the near future and in support of not only Charting the Rotting Earth, but Maleficent and Into the Aquatic Sector, and a couple more releases that we'll get into in the near future. So it should be a fun time, and hopefully one of these days it'll be Madrost and Avenger of Blood kicking ass together.
That would be sweet.
Fuck yeah, man.
Yeah.
Well, for another episode of Poppitt's Corner, guys, we're out of here. Cheers.